Hi, the book I'm going to talk about now is called Frankie Sparks and the Class Pet by Megan Fraser Blackmore. It's about a third grade class, and it starts off. The class is sitting on the floor, kind of like you guys are right now, watching me. And the class teacher, Mrs. Cupid, says, I have a really big announcement for all of you, and you're going to be so excited. They're thinking, what's going to happen? And she says, well, we're going to be able to get a class pet. A class pet. And you can imagine some of the kids are going, oh, a dog, a cat, no, a hamster, a snake. She goes, no, wait a minute. Let me explain to you how this is going to work. First of all, the pet has to fit into an aquarium. And the aquarium is about 3 foot wide. It's kind of, if you could see all of this stick, that's about as long as it is. So that lets out cats and dogs. Okay. She says, there are some guidelines or parameters we have to follow for the class pet. And I want you to listen carefully and don't shout out the names you want right now. And I'll tell you how we're going to proceed. But first, you got to listen to the guidelines or parameters, as she calls them. First of all, the pet has to be able to fit in the aquarium. The price of the pet has to be less than $50. Now that includes any adjustments you need for the aquarium, like a water dish or a feeding bowl, something like that. It has to be easily portable. That means when we go on vacations and stuff, or we're out of school a week, we have to be able to easily carry it someplace else. But it has to be able to be left alone for a weekend, because nobody's here at school on the weekends. And being left alone means that, what are you going to do about food for this pet over the weekend? So those are the 4 guidelines or parameters that I've just explained to you. Now, how is this going to work? What I want you each right now to do is to take 3 sticky notes and write down on the sticky notes what animals you'd like to see. And you can turn those in, but you have to remember what those are. And no, don't start shouting. And then your homework assignment over the weekend is, I want you to, out of the 3 choices you each made, I want you to pick the one you think would be the best after you research it. You have to figure out, is it going to fit into an aquarium? Is the cost under $50, including any setup inside the aquarium? Is it portable? Can we carry it back and forth? And what do you do about weekends? Now, you're going to bring that back on Monday, and each of you is going to make a presentation, and then we're going to have a vote. And whatever pet gets the most votes, that's the one we'll get, as long as it meets the guidelines. Now, Frankie Sparks is the whole time is thinking, rat, I want a rat, or maybe a hamster or gerbil, but I really want a rat. She's barely paying attention to what's going on, but she finally does pay attention and realize they're not going to make a decision now. And she's going to have to do some work this weekend. Now, her best friend, Maya, is sitting there, and Frankie's going, a rat, we should get a rat. A rat would be just great. You and I can vote for a rat, and we'll have most of the votes. And Maya looks at her and goes, rat? What's the matter? You don't like a rat? Well, how about a hamster? Hamsters are cute. Gerbils are cute. Rats, that sort of thing. I love rats. My aunt's a rodentologist or some rodentologist. She's a biologist who works with rats. Rats are really cool. And Maya just looks at her. And Frankie goes, well, what would you want? And she goes, well, a fish, maybe one of those fighting betta fish that are so pretty, or maybe a hermit crab or something like that. And Frankie goes, you can't do anything with a fish or a hermit crab. They're boring. A rat, we could train a rat. And she is really focused on the rat, and she's not paying any attention to how Maya is feeling about this whole thing. But they get off school and they go home the weekend, and Frankie has to solve the problem. How do you feed a rat on the weekend? So she goes into her lab and she's experimenting. She's got an old toilet roll tube, and she's doing all sorts of things that she hopes will convince everybody that you could leave a rat alone on the weekend. And she's getting ready for going back to school on Monday morning, and they're going to have a vote. Well, she might not be looking at everything. What about her best friend, Maya, who doesn't really like rats and doesn't want to vote for one? What's more important, her best friend's feelings or the what she really wants to do and the fact that she's just created this really cool invention? Well, you're going to have to read Frankie Sparks in the Class Pet to find out what has happened. Kind of fun. Find out what sort of animal they got. How about her invention? It was a pretty cool invention.